Today's teardown has been a rather elusive engine to find. Doesn't matter what engine I post, every single week I see someone asking to tear down a 2.7 liter EcoBoost out of an F150 specifically. And today we have a 2.7 liter EcoBoost specifically out of an F150. In fact, this comes out of a viewer's truck. You guys rock. Like, I don't even know how to explain my gratitude towards you viewers, not only for watching these videos, but you supply me with engines that I can't find elsewhere. How can I say thanks other than continuing to make teardowns for you every single Saturday night or whatever day you view this on? So today we're tearing down, this is the second generation of 2.7 twin turbo EcoBoost V6. It's out of an 18 F150 with 96,000 miles. Details. I know you guys love those details. Now I actually have a story on this as well. This engine comes courtesy of Dean in Toledo, Ohio. Thank you, Dean. And he said he was driving on the highway for about 250 miles and the low oil light came on, low oil pressure light came on. He pulled over, it went away, pulled back on the highway, it came on, and when he pulled back over, popped the hood, he realized that the dipstick was sticking out of the engine and the driver's side of the engine, the left-hand bank, was covered in oil. So he had it taken to the dealership. The engine sounded not so great at this point, and they condemned the engine. So they don't know what happened to this engine. I assume it still turns over because they were able to get all the flex plate bolts out of it for the torque converter. And outside of that, we're going to tear it down and find out what happened. This version of 2.7 liter EcoBoost puts out 325 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds of torque. It's quite a lot of power and torque for its displacement. In fact, I've known several people to own these trucks, and everyone had good things to say about how they drove and how reliable they were. Now, I can't tell you whether these are really reliable engines or not because, well, this is the very first one I've had. This is the very first one I've ever worked on in any capacity. So I can't tell you with confidence that these are great or terrible, having no experience. That being said, I can tell you it took me 30 minutes to pull the wiring harness off of this engine. It's a lot of locking connectors, but I think that's pretty much par for the course for late model engines. Also, why would I be pulling parts off of an engine before the teardown? Well, I like my content to be interesting throughout, from start to finish, and as interesting as some of you may find harness removal and random bracket removal, it's just not as interesting as tearing the rest of the engine down, and I don't want my videos longer than they need to be. So anyway, speaking of, let's get started. The very first thing we're going to do is not pull the spark plugs because I want to see if it feels like it has compression. So we're going to turn the crank over. Oh, it has some compression. Let's get some better leverage here. It doesn't feel great. I feel compression, but I also feel bad stuff. Okay, let's pull the plugs and see what they look like. Uh-oh. Already? First bolt? Come on now. What are we to do here? It looks like the threaded insert is spinning in the valve cover. So, blue, let's just see if we can do this. Hey, there we go. See, there's that insert. Not off to a great start. Well, I don't see anything too suspicious here. Nothing's bent. They're OEM Ford plugs. They're actually pretty clean looking. I don't know. I don't see any problems yet. Now, without plugs, I'm going to turn it over again. We're going to see if it changes how it feels. Ooh. Bad. It shouldn't take that much force. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uncle Rodney? You still here? The next thing I'm going to do is, well, there's a lot of stuff on this engine. So I guess I'm armed with an 8, and I'm just going to start trying to get down to the intake manifold. Yeah, that seems like a good plan. Let's just start zipping some 8s out and see where that gets us. Hey, that's loose now. There, now that's out of the way, and that is... Will you... Listen, I just want you... You can just hang out down here. It's good enough. I'll get this, looks like an auxiliary water pump, out of the way. And now we'll start on the EGR system. All right, how are you supposed to do this? Oh, I think I see. Oh, but there's a vacuum line. There's stuff. There we go. Now, I don't really know what's worth money on this engine because, again, first time I've ever torn one down. So I'm saving everything, and nothing will get thrown. Yet. Now I think I can start pulling the intake manifold. Oh, that was easy. And that's weird. It looks like the valve covers are also phenolic spacers for the intake plenum. We're going to start with the right hand or passenger side valve cover. Think it's going to come right off? No. But we have blue on our side. Well, you know what? Sometimes that helps. Well, the nice thing is they give you areas to pry, whether you should pry on them or not. I don't know. Okay, there's your... That's where the intake manifold bolts to. First time I've seen that. Well, it looks quite nice in here. For 96,000 miles, just under 100K, I'd say this thing was pretty well maintained. There's virtually no varnish. Cam lobes look pretty good. I don't see any valve train not where it's supposed to. There's no hints yet. And the chain, plenty of tension. I don't see anything wrong yet. Before we can get the driver's or left-hand valve cover off, we need to remove, it looks like we're going to have to pull this EGR cooler. So let's get that out of the way. Nope. Okay. There's the EGR cooler. It's the smallest one I've seen. I guess it's about the same size as what's on the 11-up Prius. Now we can get the boost control solenoid out of the way. At least I think that's what this is. Or it's evap. That might be evap. And the dipstick. No fight there. Appears to be drained. Nope. Don't want to get sick. Okay, did I get them all? I think I did. Don't you start. Okay, much of the same story on this side. I don't see any metal and that little bit of oil right there by that head bolt. All the valve train looks to be in pretty good shape. This looks clean. Timing guides appear to be in place. I don't see anything wrong yet. Well, it may already be dark outside, but it just dawned on me that I need to pull the oil filter out so we can take a look, see what the filter looks like. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That's bad. Well, that's not bass boat paint. That's some forbidden glitter. This is kind of like an LS cam bearing. I shouldn't have looked. So let's see what the filter caught. Oh yeah. That is all metal. Next, we're going to start on the turbochargers. Start with the right-hand bank first. How does this... Oh, I see. That's like a solid... Okay. So this looks like one of the coolant lines, because these are water-cooled turbos. And it also looks like it's a lot of fun to do inside the truck. I'm sure this is a great time. Also, I don't really have the right tool for this, but we're going to make it happen. Yeah, it's good enough. Now we'll try to remove the bolts that hold the turbo to the cylinder head without breaking them. It'll be fine.
It was fine.
All right, we need a little help from Blue here. Let's get these fittings out of the cylinder head. There's oil feed. Nope. Need something a little different. Okay, now we just have just this. Oh, it's full of stuff. Okay. All right, we're fine. We're fine. We're just gonna. You know what? I did this wrong, because no one in their right mind would reuse this rubber hose. We're gonna cut it. I know. I could have sold that. No, I wouldn't have sold that. Just like all the water pumps. I won't sell that stuff. Buy it new. While we're in the neighborhood, we're going to get this EGR pipe out of the way. For you prospective used coolant hose buyers, I'm sorry. I am sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I said I'm sorry. So Ford decided to use a filter before the oil goes into the turbocharger. And as you can see, this is the right bank, and it is pretty clean. I don't see a lot of debris there. But the passenger bank is loaded. Totally loaded with metal. At least it didn't go through the turbo. Well, it probably still made it through the turbo. Now the turbochargers themselves, they look pretty good. There's not a lot of in and out shaft play. About normal. It doesn't feel like the wheels hit the housing or anything. Although with the amount of metal going through these, I don't know that I would really want to sell these as good. After knowing how much metal was on those filters, I don't really think that's the best idea. They'd make good cores though. The rest of the turbos look pretty good. There's not a lot of play in the wastegate, so that's good. I guess Ford has that figured out. Next, we're going to attack the front timing cover. First, we're going to start with the thermostat and water pump. Is that it? No, that's not it. Maybe that's it. Let's give it another gander. I don't really see anything else. Does this come off pretty easy? Oh, there's a dowel right here on the timing cover, and that's what we're stuck on. That sounded good. Oh, sweet, I just poured that on my foot. So it looks like an original water pump. It really doesn't look like it's been leaking. It's in pretty good shape. It was also really easy to remove. Glad that's not inside the timing cover. This is probably worth hanging on to. I'm not going to sell a used water pump. Next, we'll remove the oil cooler. It helps when you get all the bolts out, usually. Still full of coolant. Now the crank pulley bolt. Oh, I need a puller for that one. Let's see. Will this get the job done?
Success!
Now we can start peeling these bolts out. Let's see, are these 10s? Yes. I switched to a 13 millimeter. That looks like what most of these bolts are. That one's extra deep. I'm probably going to have to use a wrench on that. Looks like I've got a bolt here, here, and here. And one here. And one here. It's a very long bolt. Now, if my calculations are correct, all of the bolts are out, I think. Let's see if I can get it off with old blue here. That's a tight one. It's really tight. Is there a trick to these like the 3.5, the earlier 3.5s, where there's something that thread in, pushes it off of the mating surface? Just a couple taps. That's it. Well, it's kind of loose. Nope, I can get this off. This side, unfortunately, well, this actually has a place. Perfect. Well, there's the inside of the timing cover. It looks okay. I don't see any issues there. Well, I was going to say everything looks good, and then I looked at it. It doesn't look good. There's also a rubber belt in here, which I already knew that. I knew this was going to have a rubber belt in it. I don't know when they switched over to this. I know the early 2.7s were chain. I guess that's probably 18's the first year for this belt. But there's some not good stuff going on in here. So up top, everything looks pretty hunky-dory. All the guides are in good shape. The chain looks good. And then you get here, little bit of metal. And in the crevasses in this timing guide, a little bit of metal there. A little bit of metal on this one. Gets better as you get towards the top. Everything down here has a little bit of a sparkly tinge to it. And then you get down here, and it's all sparkles. Multiple colors present. It's very fine material. Now, I'm not a big fan of this, and I know you guys have explained why there's a rubber belt here a million times, you guys that liked this, all two of you. I don't really see the benefit here. I don't see that outweighing the risk. But this is what they've done. And now a moment of conversation about having a rubber belt submersed in oil. Most manufacturers have spent a ton of money to keep their belts dry, but Ford and some other manufacturers have purposefully run a wet belt. About a month ago, I tore down a 1-liter Ford EcoBoost out of an EcoSport, and that utilizes both a wet timing belt and a wet oil pump drive belt like this. In that teardown, that belt came apart and the teeth clogged the pickup, which starved the engine of oil, it ruined the engine, and it ruined the turbocharger. And many of you were quick to jump to the conclusion that that happens when you use the incorrect oil. That Ford specifies a certain type of oil which is meant for having a rubber belt submersed in it, and it keeps the belt in one piece, and it means that you can change your belt at the specified interval instead of prematurely. And I understand that, and that may very well be the case. But I would say that Ford makes cars for the everyday person. They make a wide range of vehicles, and the cheapest one, the EcoSport, utilizes something that takes special oil. So if your EcoSport or if your 2.7 liter EcoBoost is 2 quarts low on oil and you're in the middle of nowhere, maybe it's 8 o'clock at night and the only thing open is a truck stop, what are you supposed to do? What? Are you supposed to risk the health of your belt and put generic oil in it, or are you supposed to drive your vehicle low on oil? It's just a question. Now let's peel the timing system off of this engine. Let's just take the tensioner loose now. I'm sure it's not under a lot of tension. It's fine. It's fine, guys. Yeah, it's fine. It's spring loaded. It's good. The chain rails have a little bit of wear. It's actually got some sparkles in it. Everything's painted in that bass boat paint. Still not bad. That one's in good shape. Now we can peel this chain off. Nice. Very nice. Tensioner number 2. Well, that wasn't as explosive. Not a ton of wear on that rail, but everything has that sparkly finish. Yeah, that rail is in really good shape. Now, I don't know if we can get this out because... Oh, yes, we can. Oh, maybe we can. What is happening here? What? So I think I can walk this belt off of this since there's no tensioner. Oh, that seems like it's on there really tight. There we are. Then we can slide that off, and then that off, and then that off. It's a nice looking chain. All these parts look like they're in good shape. Now we are going to direct our attention to the back of the engine, and I need to remove this bracket. It's not just a bracket. This is actually a crash part. So when the engine gets pushed backwards in the event of a hard collision, this protects the oil pump, which keeps it from rupturing and keeps fuel from spilling on the ground. I think this is on pretty much any engine that has a fuel pump on either end of the engine at risk of rupture in an accident. So now we're going to get this line loose. Don't worry, I was looking the other way. I don't know if I can get to any of these other fittings. Let's just start taking some bolts out and see what happens. Well, I've got a 13 millimeter socket, and we're going to town. I think I need to get these out of the way. Ah, I see how this works. It's nice they put these little keeper cords on there, or what else you want to call them. It keeps these things from falling down in here when you're working on it. It's pretty nice. This comes off, right? Yes, this comes off. There's a harness in here. What is what? Okay. All right, contraption's out. Now I can crack the rest of these lines loose. Now I can get on that other nut. And the high pressure pump is out. And now we can pull this housing. There we go. The roller looks nice. Now it's time to remove the vacuum pump. And what kind of Ford engine would we have if we didn't have some Torx? Got to use the entire toolbox today. Looks like it's in pretty good shape. Now we're going to remove these coolant fittings. I think it'll be easier than the hoses. All right, now we can pull some cams. We'll start off with the right-hand bank. That's some pretty clean oil in there. Well, the journals definitely have had some debris run through them. But they're not awful. There's not like piles of metal in them. You can tell there's just a little bit of wear in there. I think these would clean up. I don't think they're ruined by any stretch. And the caps are about the same. They all have a little bit of a gritty feeling to them. They might be able to be polished out. I wouldn't condemn this yet. And the camshafts don't look too bad. There's a little bit of wear there. Yeah, it's pretty bad there. It's not terrible, it's just that's probably the worst journal. Now it is finally time to crack the head bolts loose. And in case anyone's wondering, they are 12.15 millimeter. Oh, brakes. Yes, we need brakes. Huh? Now, we should be able to peel this off, but I'm going to put a tray underneath it because I don't want this thing leaking all over me. Did I miss any bolts? Is there anything else keeping this thing down? No, I think I just need a little bit of help from Blue just to break the seal. I haven't run into this situation before. I don't like it. And it moves too much to have any extra bolts in it. Let's just try pulling really hard. A little bit of violence will get you what you need. It's this corner down here. I don't know. In fact, I'm actually going to grab a head bolt and lightly thread it in so it doesn't go flying off the engine when I get it out of that dowel. There we are. Man, that took a lot of force. I don't know what you're supposed to do besides pry on it. Oh, I see bad stuff. Well, this dowel right here, man. Head gasket looks good. All right. Who can spot it? Everyone should be able to spot it. You can see this has shiny sections on the edges of the crown, and that is from making contact with the combustion chamber, with the cylinder head. And the only way for that to happen is to either have too long of a rod, which is... The other option is that there's no bearing left, and if there's no bearing left, it allows the rod to travel farther in the bore, and then the piston can make contact with the cylinder head, and it looks like it also hit a valve right here. So we have to do our test. We have to see if everything passes here. So let's start with that. That's a fail. Okay, so I mean, 2/3, this is kind of like how I did in high school. There's definitely some problems with that cylinder there. Let's go look at that cylinder head. So the rear two cylinders, these don't look bad. But when you look at this one, you can see the head has been cleaned here and here from the piston striking it. Now, I don't think that hurts the cylinder head in this case, although I'd be worried about the condition of the valves, knowing that at least one of the valves looks like it made contact with the piston. There was a clean spot. So I'm not quite sure. It looks like right there. That's the spot. So I'm not quite sure if this is going to be a good cylinder head or not, but I don't see anything too destroyed yet. And this is something I really like to see. These engines use both port and direct injection. The direct injection gives you the benefit of higher compression, the ability to run that higher compression, and the port injection keeps the intake valves from getting gummed up, requiring a regular service to keep those clean. So that's nice to see on something like this. Now time for the other bank. It's a very similar condition on this bank. Nothing is too torn up. All the followers look nice, they roll nice. Although this journal here is pretty coarse. These caps have a little bit more wear than the other bank. At least a couple of them do. Eesh. And that one's pretty rough. The cams don't look too bad, but again, they're definitely going to need some attention before you put them in something else. Some of these parts might be so cheap new that the attention they need might be more expensive than buying new parts. Brakes on. All right, I've got one head bolt lightly threaded in just because of my experience with the last head. So first we're going to try to get this side loose. All right, that side's pretty loose. It's this front that's kind of stuck. Well, maybe not. That came up pretty easy. That is very on there. It looks like they leave you a slot back here to pry on, but it's not shaped right. There we go. It just took convincing. Well, this side does look better than the other side. I don't see any impact marks on any of the pistons. Let's get the head gasket out of the way. That's in great shape. Let's do our test. Ooh, I think that moved, or maybe I turned the engine over. I think I turned the engine over. Uh-oh, I think I see a problem. All right, I've got the crank pulley bolts back in it. We're just going to turn this over. I just want to make sure that my eyes were not receiving me. Oh, we're good. We're good. I thought this one wasn't moving, but we're good. So now we're back on the other side, and now that I can turn this over, I want to show you how much this moves. That's a lot. I think that's a lot more than 2 rod bearings stacked up. And this cylinder head, no impact marks. Everything looks pretty good. Now, I didn't get a good shot of the bores. Before we flip this over, let's take a look. This side looks pretty good. Nice cross hatching. A little bit of wear, but not terrible on this side. Now, this one's not down far enough in the bore to judge the condition, but that cylinder looks nice. These two look pretty good. Now it's time to turn this thing over, probably evacuate all of the fluid left inside so we can pull the oil pan. This is a... Will you just do something? Now it's time to peel the oil pan off. And yes, it is plastic. And no, I'm not a big fan, but I understand that they are quieter. They make engines virtually silent when they crack and let all the oil out. I'm kidding. I'm sure there's a valid reason, it's probably cost, that people decide to design engines with plastic oil pans. Yeah, we're just going to peel this off and not even talk about it. Now, can I just pull this off? Nah, not even close. A little nudge here. And that took a lot of force. I don't know how you're supposed to get this off otherwise. What is in? Ooh, that's sparkly. Well, upon first glance, I saw this and I went, uh-oh. But then I dropped it. But really, that piece just falls out. It goes between the pickup, which is into the pan, and the oil pump here. So that wasn't like that until I pulled the oil pan. Speaking of oil pans, would you look at it? There's so many sparkles in here, it looks like it's a metal pan. Now, I'm not quite sure how to get this off. That's kind of got me perplexed. Are there bolts on the bottom? No. How am I supposed to access that? Explain it. Make it make sense. All right, we're going to get this. I think we're going to get this off. Whoa, whoa, whoa there. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I broke it. Oh, no, that thing that's full of metal that no one would want to put in their engine is now broken. But what's really interesting is I don't see a screen. Where's the screen? We're going to get this off. I don't care what happens. I'm not going to sell a used plastic oil pan, and we are going to get this off. This is the right tool for the job. That seems like I might go to the hospital if that gets loose. What the? Will you just... It's like glued in. I don't care how many pieces it's in, it's coming out. It's really loud. But hey, I knocked a piece of bearing material, some bearing foil. There we go. See, it just takes a little persuasion. And there is, in fact, a screen. See, I couldn't tell that from looking at it. And it's got lots of metal. Ooh, there's lots of metal that came out of that. That was worth it in scrap alone. So there's the metal that fell out of this thing. There's what the rest of that pan looks like. Looks like anti-seize. I mean, the engine does turn over, so it did its job. And there's the screen in the pickup. That's a strange way to go about it. I guess the big advantage here is that it's cheap. All right, now it's time to play with the oil pump. All right, I've had enough fun. It's time to get this unbolted and blast it apart. Well, that was easy. All right, I have to stop here, and I have to talk about the way the block is constructed. It does have, I guess, what you would consider a bed plate, but it doesn't sandwich on a flat plane like most of the engines we've seen with bed plates on this channel. This has a ton of strength built into it. This is really quite impressive. I can understand why people are able to get so much power out of these things, because everything's so reinforced. It's pretty neat to see. But there's a bearing right there. Sparkly oil-like substance. Bit of metal mixed in. Ah, there's so much sparkly stuff in here. Sparkly oil. It's a vane style pump, and it exploded when I took it apart. It's fine. You can kind of see how that works. But yeah, lots of metal in the oil here. You can definitely see the metal hue in the oil. There's some damage to this housing, and all the vanes have some wear too. Some of that metal's out of the pan. Most of that is. I definitely wouldn't reuse this component. Not after all the metal that's gone through it. No way. All right, now it's time to look at the oil pump belt. This is an original belt, or at least it appears to be, and 96,000 miles. Now I understand that these don't open up this wide while it's running, but it's literally cracking everywhere. I wonder what the service interval is for this belt. Now it's time to split the block, and I'm a little leery here because 2 of my engine stand bolts are bolted to it, and I don't really have much of a choice in that, say. I can probably move one arm to this side, but we may do this a little bit sketchy. So first we're going to get all the bolts out, and then we'll deal with that disaster. Well, that went by pretty quickly. All right, before I go any further, got my stand unbolted here, and then I found another bolt hole to use here. So we're 3 out of 4. That's better grades than I got in high school. So let's just get this rear main seal plate out of the way, which is a little more work than I anticipated. Well, that should be good enough, I think. Hey, that's not too bad. That wasn't bad at all. This thing is just crazy. There's so much material in here. I don't think you could throw a rod out of this engine. That's a challenge, guys. If you can find me a 2.7 that actually had a rod leave the outside of this engine, I don't see how it's possible. There's just so much material in here. Oh. There's our knock. So here's our knock. It's a little, he did say the engine sounded like a box of rocks, and I don't know how big rocks he's had in boxes, but that's going to make some racket. Now I'm just really impressed with this casting. This is just, I've never seen a factory engine like this. Never seen any engine like this. Now it is time to turn this thing over, start pulling the rods and pistons out, which we may just pull the crank first, and then push the rods and pistons out after that. Now you can definitely tell the color difference between this journal and this journal. The heat does this. It's kind of like your cast iron pans when they've been seasoned. They look like this at first, and then they look like that after they've been cooked. And there's been a lot of heat in that, a lot of friction there. The rest of the journals seem to look okay. I'm going to do this a little bit different. I'm going to take all the rod caps off, and then I'm going to pull the main caps, pull the crank. I think it'll be easier to get the rods and pistons out that way. Oh, okay. Also, by doing it this way, it ensures that all the rods and pistons make it to the top of the bore. All right, looks like we just have 8 main cap bolts, and the crank will be out. There's the thrust bearing. I was wondering. Well, before I pull this crank, I gotta show you something. That is a spun main. It's not bad, but it's not good. The gaps in the bearing are supposed to line up with the part of the block there, which, by the way, it is fractured. It's not machined. Haven't seen that yet either. Lots of firsts today. Okay, let's just pull this crank right out. That cover is really fine. Ooh. That's the opposite of good. It's bad. It's real bad. Now this part should be pretty easy, I think. Or should I not say anything? Well, that comes out really easily. What is happening? Well, I don't really know where to start, so we're just going to start with the number 1 rod bearing. It's gone. It's the powder that we found inside of this engine. But the rest of the rod bearings, yeesh. Definitely a case of oil starvation. Now, I look these rods and pistons over as closely as I can. First, I don't know why there's a color difference or a way I don't know why they look like they do. If someone knows, please put it down in the comments. This is the rod that cooked the bearing. You can see it's had some heat, some friction in it. The rest of these don't look too bad, but I was looking at the rods and pistons, mainly the pistons. I was looking for maybe a cracked ring land or something to cause excess crankcase pressure. And I don't see it except, which one was it? I think it was this one. That oil control ring is just caked full of oil deposits and carbon. But I still don't think it's enough. Like I just don't think that's enough. All of the rings spin. They're all pretty freed up. I found a little bit of damage to that piston there. It's really not that terrible. But let's go back to the piston with damage. And that's the one that hit the cylinder head. And I think probably one valve there. So that one is definitely not going to be something I'd reuse. But that's the worst of the damage. This isn't all of the main bearings. These are just what actually came off the crank. And as you can see, the bottom shells are really rough. Top shells, pretty rough, but they're bad. We're going to still try to get the spun bearing off of this. And I don't know if we're going to be able to do that or not. Let's get something to pry on this with. Yeah, see? Just a little, needs a little bit of help here. Oh yeah, that's bad. Yeah, not good. Now the back of these, a little bit of damage. It's not like it spun it very far, but I mean, there's still damage done. The block does have some pretty significant damage. That's the cylinder that deleted a rod bearing. And that's what happens when that piston can rock back and forth. It doesn't have a lot of skirt, so it definitely did some damage. The rest of the bores do have some damage as well. And pretty not great. The other bank definitely has similar wear. I don't know if anybody builds these engines. I have no idea what the value of these parts are. It's so new. Something else worth mentioning, although I don't think it's really related to this type of failure, the amount of RTV on this factory engine, it's a little on the much side. I understand they don't want to leak, but oil flows through this, and it looks like the RTV would significantly hamper the amount of oil going through here. It may not. It may not be a big deal, and they may have accounted for that. And there's the number one main cap. You can definitely tell it's cooked. We know how this engine failed. It was starved of oil. Dean said that he was driving along, the oil pressure light came on, he pulled over, found the dipstick hanging out of the engine, the driver's side of the engine just covered in oil. He added 5 quarts, which is a lot, and then drove another 30 miles before it started running rough, and it was probably knocking pretty bad at that point. The damage had been done, but we don't know why it pushed the dipstick out. On turbocharged engines, the crankcase ventilation system is incredibly important, and if there's any issues there, it can push seals out, it can push the dipstick out. I had a turbocharged MX6. When I melted pistons, or cracked a ringland, it would pop the dipstick out. I'm quite used to this type of failure. However, in this case, I don't think it had any piston damage. I didn't see any cracked ringlands. I didn't see any melted pistons, and those things would usually coincide with a misfire, and Dean said it was running perfectly fine. It just threw a low oil pressure warning. Obviously, there was something wrong here. Some other problem with the crankcase system must have had a blockage. I don't know how that's controlled. I'm not that familiar with these engines to where I can tell you, oh, well, when this goes bad, that happens. But the more of these I see, maybe that information will be readily available and I can show you guys more failures like this. Hopefully not for you 2.7 guys. A couple takeaways from this teardown. I saw a lot of things I did like about this engine and a few things I didn't. Some of the things I do like, it has dual injection, both port and direct injection. That's huge, saves maintenance costs. You don't need induction services. That's great. The bottom end of that engine is built very stout. I was really impressed with that. I'm not a big fan of wet belts in any facet, but I think that if you could find somebody to either retrofit the 15 to 17 2.7 chain, or maybe an aftermarket company comes out and builds those components to drive that pump with a chain, and maybe someone makes a metal oil pan for it, I think that'd be a fantastic engine. Wasn't the easiest to work on, but if you don't need to, is it really a problem? I think all of you owe Dean a huge thank you, but no one owes him a thank you more than I do, because this was an engine I've been chasing for a really, really long time. So if you'd like to buy parts out of this engine or anything else I've torn down or off of this 2007 350Z, which is hit, just a little fender, frame bender, it's fine. I'm going to leave our email in the video description. You can also go to importapart.com and peruse our inventory. I've been uploading parts cards every single week. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.